The world has always been a chessboard for powerful actors. Nations vie for influence. They use various means to shape global events. One of the most controversial figures in this game is George Soros. A billionaire financier, Soros has used his immense wealth to influence geopolitical events. Soros operates primarily through his Open Society foundations. This network of NGOs funnels money and resources to various causes worldwide. While OSF claims to promote democracy and human rights, its actions often tell a different story. Critics argue that Soros is a puppet master, instigating revolutions and toppling governments that don't align with his globalist agenda. Soros's tactics are subtle yet effective. He doesn't command armies or launch invasions. Instead, he empowers local actors to do his bidding. This is achieved through funding, training, and providing a platform for anti-government movements. Soros's NGOs often work behind the scenes, shaping public opinion and creating the conditions for regime change. The results of these operations are often presented as spontaneous uprisings. However, a closer look reveals a well-coordinated strategy. This strategy, often referred to as the Color Revolution playbook, has been employed in numerous countries with devastating consequences. The Color Revolution playbook is a blueprint for instigating regime change under the guise of promoting democracy. It relies on creating a narrative of oppression and injustice, then mobilizing the populace against the ruling government. This is achieved through a multi-pronged approach. First, Soros's network identifies and funds local NGOs and opposition groups. These groups are often presented as grassroots movements, but their funding and support often come from foreign sources. They receive training in activism, propaganda, and organizing protests. Second, Soros-funded media outlets play a crucial role in shaping public opinion. They amplify the narratives of oppression and corruption, often exaggerating or fabricating stories to discredit the government. Social media is also heavily utilized to spread propaganda and mobilize protests. Finally, economic pressure is applied to weaken the target regime. This can take the form of sanctions, currency manipulation, or divestment campaigns. The goal is to create economic hardship and fuel public discontent, making the population more receptive to regime change. The 2014 Ukrainian Revolution is a prime example of the Color Revolution playbook in action. When Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych rejected an EU trade deal in favor of closer ties with Russia, it triggered a wave of protests in Kiev. These protests, while seemingly spontaneous, were anything but. Soros-funded NGOs were deeply involved in organizing and coordinating the protests. They provided logistical support, training, and even funding to the protesters. Meanwhile, Soros-backed media outlets amplified the protesters' grievances and demonized Yanukovych, portraying him as a corrupt dictator beholden to Russia. The protests eventually turned violent, with clashes between protesters and security forces. Soros himself was in contact with US officials during this period, advocating for regime change and even suggesting potential replacements for Yanukovych. Leaked emails later confirmed his involvement in shaping the US response to the crisis. Yanukovych was eventually ousted, and a new pro-Western government was installed. Whether this was a genuine people's revolution or a carefully orchestrated coup remains a subject of debate. However, Soros's role in the events leading up to Yanukovych's removal is undeniable. While Soros has been successful in influencing events in many countries, he has also faced significant pushback. One of the most vocal critics of Soros is Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. Orbán has accused Soros of trying to undermine Hungary's sovereignty and flood the country with migrants. In response to Soros's activities, Orbán's government has taken steps to curtail the influence of foreign-funded NGOs. They have passed laws requiring NGOs to register as foreign agents and disclose their funding sources. The government has also launched investigations into Soros-funded organizations, accusing them of tax evasion and other financial irregularities. Soros has denounced Orbán's actions as authoritarian and an attack on democracy. However, Orbán remains defiant, arguing that he is simply protecting Hungary's national interests from foreign interference. The clash between Soros and Orbán highlights the growing global backlash against foreign interference in domestic politics. Hungary's experience serves as a cautionary tale for other nations targeted by Soros's network. It shows that by exposing the funding sources and agendas of these seemingly benign organizations, governments can resist their influence and protect their sovereignty. Soros's influence extends far beyond Eastern Europe. His network has been active in Latin America for decades, supporting left-leaning causes and undermining conservative governments. From funding student protests to backing opposition movements, Soros's fingerprints can be found on numerous political upheavals in the region. In Venezuela, Soros-funded NGOs played a key role in supporting the opposition to Hugo Chavez and his successor, Nicolas Maduro. They provided training, funding, and a platform for anti-government activists. They also amplified the opposition's narrative of corruption and economic mismanagement, contributing to the political instability that has plagued the country. In Brazil, Soros's network supported the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff, a left-wing president accused of corruption. They funded NGOs that organized protests against Rousseff and amplified allegations of corruption against her government. Rousseff's removal paved the way for the rise of Jair Bolsonaro, a right-wing populist who has also faced criticism from Soros-funded groups. Soros's activities in Latin America have had a destabilizing effect on the region. By supporting opposition movements and undermining democratically elected governments, he has contributed to political polarization, social unrest, and economic instability. Section 6. The Arab Spring, a wave of Soros-funded unrest. The Arab Spring, a series of pro-democracy uprisings that swept across the Middle East and North Africa in 2011, was hailed by many as a sign of hope for the region. However, the aftermath of these uprisings has been mixed, with some countries descending into chaos and civil war. Some argue that Soros's involvement in the Arab Spring contributed to this instability. Soros-funded NGOs were active in several countries caught up in the Arab Spring, including Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya. They provided training and support to pro-democracy activists, helping to organize protests and spread information. However, critics argued that Soros's network also played a role in shaping the post-revolution governments, often favoring those aligned with Western interests. In Egypt, for example, Soros-funded groups were accused of supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist movement that came to power after the fall of Hosni Mubarak. The Brotherhood's rule proved to be short-lived, as they were ousted in a military coup in 2013. The ensuing crackdown on the Brotherhood and other opposition groups led to a period of political repression and instability that continues to this day. The Arab Spring highlights the complex and often unintended consequences of foreign intervention. While Soros's network may have played a role in promoting democracy in some countries, it also contributed to instability and violence in others. Section 7. India, a new target for Soros's meddling. In recent years, India has emerged as a new target for Soros's meddling. Soros has been critical of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, accusing him of being authoritarian and undermining India's democratic institutions. Soros-funded NGOs have become increasingly active in India, supporting causes that challenge Modi's government. One of the key areas of focus for Soros's network in India has been the issue of minority rights. Soros-funded NGOs have supported groups that advocate for the rights of Muslims, Dalits, and other marginalized communities. They have also been critical of Modi's Hindu nationalist policies, which they see as discriminatory and divisive. Soros's involvement in India has drawn the ire of Modi and his supporters. They accuse Soros of trying to destabilize India and undermine its sovereignty. The Indian government has taken steps to crack down on foreign-funded NGOs, making it more difficult for them to operate in the country. The battle between Soros and Modi is likely to continue in the coming years. It reflects a broader global trend of rising nationalism and resistance to foreign interference. Section 8. Cui bono. Unmasking the beneficiaries. The question of who benefits from Soros's activities is crucial to understanding his motives. While he claims to be a champion of democracy and human rights, his critics argue that his true agenda is to advance the interests of global elites at the expense of national sovereignty. One of the main beneficiaries of Soros's activities are multinational corporations. By promoting free trade agreements and weakening national regulations, Soros's network creates a more favorable environment for global businesses to operate. This often comes at the expense of local businesses and workers, who face increased competition and lower wages. Another group that benefits from Soros's activities are Western governments, particularly the United States. By promoting regime change and installing pro-Western leaders, Soros's network helps to advance U.S. foreign policy objectives. This often involves securing access to resources, expanding military bases, or countering the influence of rivals like Russia and China. In essence, Soros's philanthropy can be seen as a form of investment. He invests in causes and movements that align with his globalist ideology, ultimately benefiting himself and his allies. This raises serious questions about the true nature of his philanthropy and its impact on the world. Section 9. Conclusion. A world of puppeteers and puppets? George Soros is a complex and controversial figure. His supporters view him as a philanthropist and champion of democracy, while his critics see him as a puppet master who undermines national sovereignty. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. There is no doubt that Soros has used his wealth to influence political events around the world. His network of NGOs has played a role in toppling governments, shaping public opinion, and promoting a globalist agenda. Whether this is a force for good or ill depends on one's perspective. What is clear is that Soros's activities raise important questions about the role of money and influence in international affairs. In an increasingly interconnected world, where billionaires like Soros wield immense power, it is crucial to have a transparent and accountable system for regulating their activities. The world is not a stage for a puppet master to manipulate. It is a tapestry woven from the threads of diverse cultures, histories, and aspirations. Respecting national sovereignty and allowing nations to chart their own course is essential for a just and equitable world order.